In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. We have a lot to get through tonight, and I'm going to warn you right now that tonight's talk is going to be fairly technical, and that's why I kind of had Beverly send out a advice telling people to bring something to take notes with if they want to. I don't have handouts, but I'm willing to find some medium, maybe through Flocknote, to make the slides available in a PDF within the next couple of days. Because I think these are important. Why am I doing this? I have to be honest, part of this was, part of my reason for doing what I'm doing was inspired by the tragedy of Charlie Kirk. And the reason being why, and I didn't agree with Charlie Kirk on every single thing, but what I liked about Charlie Kirk is he was very much for going in public spaces and having dialogue. And I think learning how to articulate our beliefs, learning how to dialogue with people has become a lost art. And part of it is because logic has become a lost art. So when I was teaching high school, I decided to teach a course on Christian apologetics to the young people that I was there with. It was a senior seminar that was an honors elective course for seniors. And the whole idea was, if you're going away to college, you better learn to explain and defend your faith, especially these day and age. Because if you're not going to one of the maybe dozen actual Catholic colleges in the U.S., because a lot of our Catholic colleges in the U.S. are Catholic in name only. And by those, I'm talking about the big ones. I'm talking about Notre Dame. I'm talking about Georgetown. I'm talking about Loyola, Xavier. You cannot depend on actually getting Catholic thought in any of those places. Notre Dame, maybe in some of the theology classes, you're going to get actual Catholic thought, but certainly not in the other subjects. It's been isolated to one area. So I want to give the students a chance to be able to articulate and explain and defend their faith, and also the opportunity, like let's say, okay, someone is totally against the faith, they're having their own struggles, so this could be an opportunity for you to learn more about your faith so that you're able to at least fully understand and give a shot on what you're contending with or what you might object to. So what we're going to be dealing with tonight is the art of Christian apologetics. Has anyone ever heard that term before, apologetics? Okay, so what apologetics is it's when you walk around to someone and say, "I'm so sorry that I'm Catholic." That's the art of apologetics. No, the term apologetics actually comes from Scripture, believe it or not. It comes from 1 Peter 3:15. He says, "Always be prepared to make a defense to anyone who calls you to account for the hope that is in you, but do it with gentleness and reverence." So I think it's important that we understand this verse. This verse is the verse that guides apologetics. So first, we have to be prepared to make a defense of our faith, but to do it with gentleness and reverence. And I think that's very important. And keep your conscience clear so that when you are abused, those who revalue your good behavior in Christ may put them to shame. These are great things to remember. So I always say the first rule of Christian apologetic is be charitable. We have to understand that when we're talking to people come from a different line of faith, people come from a different background, people come from all sorts of different understandings, and a lot of them will come to us with complete inaccuracies, even lies and myths about what Catholics actually believe. So it's best to do the best we can to be able to be charitable to them. This is what we do not want to do. We do not want to hit them upside the head with a Bible. There are some people who try to evangelize that way. And I don't know if you've encountered them. They've become very popular in Fort Myers. I haven't seen them so much in Naples, but in Fort Myers, I see them all the time. And as much as I believe they truly think they're doing God's work, I don't think they're very effective in evangelization. That's not a way. But if we learn how to engage people, how to have conversations, and how to argue, there is a time we've come to attach a negative connotation to the word argument. But the term argument simply means to present a case. And so tonight's session, what I'm going to try to get through, and it's a lot, is I'm really giving you a freshman course in logic, because we live in a world where logic has been completely abandoned and it's been completely forgotten. And so we'll end, the first part of this will be an introduction to logic, and the second, we're going to talk about some of my favorite things, which are logical fallacies. And if you want examples of logical fallacies, all you have to do is turn on any politician these days, and you're going to get a ton of examples of logical fallacies. One thing I did in my class once is I had them watch the Clinton-Trump debate in 2016, and I gave them taboo buzzers, and they were to make a buzzing noise every time there was a logical fallacy. And it was like watching, George Carlin being censored. You just you couldn't stop it from going. So the first two rules, be charitable. And the second rule is to be logical. I think being logical is very important. Nope, is it going?
Peter the fool, who's illogical?
All right. Nope. John, I've already lost my talk here. And I don't think it's going through the TVs, is it? Yeah. Oh, there I am. Am I in Chrome or in? Yeah, sorry, I am MacBook clueless, and my computer was going. All right. All right. It's not going up there, is it? All right. Yeah, it's a big clip. It's not going through the TV. It's really certainly not worth it. All right. Be logical. Now, a lot of people are going to say, what does logic have to do with Christianity? What does logic have to do with theology? And I think this is a very important a very important point to make, because we live in a world where faith has come to mean the antithesis of reason. That if I have faith, it means that I believe in something that is not explainable, that I believe in something that is almost superstitious. In fact, faith in Christ and faith in the flying spaghetti monster are the same thing, according to people now. And instead of recognizing that there is an integral relationship between faith and reason. And so if I understand faith as putting my trust in someone else. That's a definition, a working definition of faith. And if logic can dictate to me that there is a God who created, sustained, and made the universe, then putting my trust in that being becomes not an illogical or irrational choice, but it becomes the logical and the rational choice. You've all heard me say that a lot. And so I just thought I'd bring that again. But explicitly, what does logic have to do with theology? And believe it or not, the word from which we get logic is in Scripture. It's in the very first chapter, in the very first verse of the Gospel of St. John. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. Now, we translate word as word in English, but we really, our English is so limited that we're missing what's being said there. The Greek word that's translated as word in English there is logos. That's spelled Logos, if you're going to transliterate. I think I do this right here. Logos. And logos means more than just word. In fact, word is sometimes listed in lexicons as maybe the fourth or fifth definition. Logos is understood as an ordering principle. It's understood as word as well, as reason, as the ground, as discourse. So St. John, when he's writing the gospel under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, is actually thinking of God's word in the Jewish tradition, but he's also borrowing some stuff from ancient Greek philosophers, particularly Plato and Aristotle. And Plato and Aristotle, especially Aristotle, in many ways is considered the father of logic. And a lot of the rules for logic that we're going to talk about today come to us from Aristotle. So right from the beginning, St. John is telling us that God's reasonable. And if you read the writings of St. Paul, which is the majority of the New Testament, or the writings of St. Paul is clearly grounded in these logical principles. He's clearly grounded. in Greek philosophy in this understanding of logic. So we want to be charitable, be logical. These are kind of the two main rules. So what is logic? Logic is the science of rational thinking or reasoning. And this is something you have to understand. Man is a rational animal, meaning that we are created as beings. Our ability to think and to reason is what sets us apart from any other species. It has still not been proven that any other animal in the world is capable of thought or reason. We can see some basic instinctive problem-solving skills in intelligent animals like apes and parrots. We even see in some of those cases mimicry of language. I'm amazed that some days I feel like I'm actually having a conversation with my bird. Not only does he have a vocabulary, rather extensive vocabulary, but African greys, they say, well, maybe they might be able to think like a child. But there's still a certain rationality that has never been proven in animals, and that is, are they even aware of their own existence? You know, they're sensitive souls. They are able to sense the things that are in front of them, and they're able to respond to stimuli. But do they even have an awareness of self? And we've not been able to see that in all the research we've done. So man is a rational animal. Our ability to think is, in the Christian tradition, what relates us to God, what makes us creatures that are made in the image and likeness of God. So by means of logic, we make arguments. Again, arguments aren't bad things. And we make arguments through the use of premises by which we make implications and infer conclusions. I have a great video here on infer versus imply, but I'm going to skip it tonight. You think it'll work with a microphone? This might be fun. Inference, and implication are two very different things, and I'll teach you the difference of it.
Do you understand why people don't want to play
No?
with you?
Can you hear it?
Although it's a question I've been pondering since preschool. Hey.
I'm going to skip ahead here a little bit.
Dolphins might be smarter than people.
There you go.
They might be smarter than some people. Maybe we could do an experiment to find out.
That's easy enough. We'd need a large tank of water, a hoop to jump through, and a bucket of whatever bite-sized treats you find tasty.
I don't get it. A dolphin might. Oh, I see. You guys are inferring that I'm stupid.
That's not correct. We were implying it. You then inferred it.
So we make implications by which someone comes to an inference. It's an important understanding to understand the distinction between those two. John, is there a way that I can make this big again here? I'm so MacBook illiterate. I think I'm going to skip videos from here out. Just show me how to do it, Nami. What do you do? How you do that? No? You're having the problem too. Just need to do a refresh? Okay, I could have done that. That'll work. Will it? He says it works, but my OCD hates it. Okay. So most of our reasoning, there are basically two types of logic, and we're going to be dealing with one over the other. So we have inductive versus deductive reasoning. So the fundamental structure of all reasoning is that we move from premises to a conclusion. We move from premise to conclusion. So deductive reasoning moves from general down to particular. So here's an example. So we have all men are mortal. This is the classic syllogism right here. All men are mortal. Some of you may have heard this one before. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. So you see how we've started out with a generalization, we've moved down to a particular, we see that these are premises that are true, and we see that the logic is connected. So therefore this would be a valid argument. Deductive reasoning, which we're not going to work with here, moves from the particular to the general. I'm immortal, he's immortal, she's immortal, all men are mortal, all right? The difference between those two is inductive reasoning yields probability, and, nope, got it backwards. Inductive reasoning yields certainty, deductive reasoning yields probability. So again, for a deductive argument, we want to make sure, this is for an inductive argument again, I got that backwards. We want to make sure that we will look at the terms, the premises, which are a series of propositions, and the argument itself. So the terms have to be clear, the premises have to be true, and the argument must be valid. What we mean by valid is that the conclusion follows forth logically from the premises. So here's the example of an inductive argument again. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. Are all men mortal? Yes, all right. Is Socrates a man? And does it therefore conclude from those two premises that Socrates therefore is mortal? Yes. That is an inductive argument. All right? We also call this particular form a very simple syllogism. So, the terms, the subject or predicate, men, mortal, Socrates. These are the three terms that we have in this particular argument here. Are those terms clear? Right? If we talk about Socrates, you know you're talking about Socrates. Man, is that term clear? Yes, okay? And so terms are either clear or unclear. So sometimes when you're having an argument or a debate with someone, you can say, wait a minute, I don't really know what you mean by that term. That term is ambiguous. So could you please clarify that term? Terms are not true or false. Terms are either clear or unclear. But then we get over to the propositions, and propositions are either true or false. All men are mortal. Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal. I'm going to skip the video for now. Again, all men are mortal. That's true. Socrates is a man. That's true. So what is truth, which is what the video is that beautiful scene from The Passion of the Christ where Jesus and Pilate are dialoguing. And Jesus says to Pilate, I have come to testify to the truth, to which Pilate responds to him, Veritas, quid est veritas? Truth, what is truth? So we have to understand the nature of objective truth. What is truth? Truth is that which corresponds to reality. That's what truth is. Truth is that which corresponds to reality. So now that we've looked and we've seen, okay, when I make an argument, I want to see, are my terms clear? Are my premises true? And then we want to look at, is my logic valid? All men are mortal, Socrates is a man, Socrates is mortal. We've just valid logic, right? You can see very clearly how we can deduce that Socrates is mortal from the two propositions that have been made. Everyone following me so far? Okay. So now we move on. Have the laws of logic been followed? A deductive argument is logically valid if its conclusion necessarily follows its premise, and it's invalid if it does not. Now we're going to move over to the laws of logic, which will help us to understand if the conclusion is followed. We call these kind of the rules of thought. These come from Aristotle, and they were carried through by St. Thomas Aquinas, and they've helped us to understand the basic rules of logic. So the first one is what we call the principle or the law of identity. It's a very simple law. It's X equals X is the law of identity. A thing is what a thing is. So every being, object, or proposition is identical to itself. It has a specific nature and a definition that makes it what it is. This is how we make sure terms are clear, right? So what I'm saying is a triangle is a triangle. So if a triangle is a triangle, it therefore is not a square. It is a triangle. Because the identity of a triangle is triangle, the identity of square is square, and those are two very distinct and different realities. Now, you'd think that that's a pretty obvious principle, right? This principle of identity, X equals X. But try saying something in the world today like woman. and watch how quickly people get unhinged. And this is why I'm saying logic and reasoning is so important. I mean, we kind of laugh because we know where it's getting, but as we see the absurdity, but the world's not seeing the absurdity of these things. The world's completely forgotten this whole sense of logic. This is why this stuff is so important. This is why, of all people, a priest and not a lawyer needs to be teaching this stuff, right? Because we have come to not understand simple things like the principle of identity. A dog is a dog, right? A cat's not a dog. Now, dogs may differ in breed and size and temperament, but it's still a dog. There is a unique thing that makes a dog a dog. A dog's dogness is what makes a dog what it is. All right? Water is H2O. So identity doesn't always mean that, A is A, but A is that which is connected to A. H2O. But if it's not H2O, it ain't water. Very simple. Okay? These are all examples of the law of identity. Okay. The second one is the principle of non-contradiction, and this is very important. So a principle of identity says a thing is what it is. The law of non-contradiction is something cannot be and be at the same time and in the same respect. What I mean is, if a triangle is a triangle, then a triangle can't be a square, right? A circle can't be a square. A positive can't be a negative. Something that is wet cannot be dry. You can't be wet and dry at the same time. Okay, I guess half of you could be wet and dry at the same time, right? But my finger cannot be wet and dry at the same time. Not even really, because if you're half wet, you're wet, right? If you're half wet, you're wet, right? So, that's like I remember one time when I was a kid, the phone rang, and my sister was outside by the pool, and the phone rang, and my sister said, "I'll get it." And my mom said, "No, you're wet." And my sister said, "No, I'm not." She was standing in the middle of the pool. Shows the intrinsic nature of teenagers to contradict their parents, no matter what. But something cannot be wet and not wet at the same time. So the door is open. The door cannot be open and shut at the same time. It can't. It's either open or it's shut, period. Now, you can argue with me about half open maybe or something like that. Half open, still open. Half shut is still shut, right? A statement cannot be both true and false at the same time. That's impossible, because what's truth? Truth is that which corresponds to reality. Something cannot correspond to reality and not correspond to reality at the same time. These are laws of non-contradiction. Christ is divine and Christ is not divine can not both be true at one time. Now notice what I didn't say. I didn't say that Christ is divine and Christ is human cannot be true at the same time. That's a theological principle that we can talk about later. But we cannot say that Christ is divine and Christ is also not divine. That would be illogical. That would be in violation of the principle of non-contradiction. All right? John, there it goes, okay. Next is what we call the law of excluded middle. So every proposition must be either true or false. It's similar to non-contradiction, but non-contradiction says something can't be both true and false at the same time. A square cannot be a triangle at the same time. So something can't be both what it is and what it is not. That's the law of non-contradiction. The law of excluded middle says that every proposition is either true or false. There really is no middle option when we are making propositions. When you're making a proposition, your propositions, your premises, in the case of an argument, are either true or false. They cannot be both. There's not a middle option. So, right? It's raining or it's not raining. Right? Period. Right? There's no middle ground. 2 + 2 = 4. It either does or it doesn't. The light is on or the light is off, not on. One or the other. So these are what we call the rules of thought. I don't know why this thing doesn't like me. John, I'm hitting every button and it's not advancing. There it goes, okay. So we call those the rules of thought. The rules of thought are the principles of identity, the principles of non-contradiction, and the principles of excluded middle. So again, I kind of want to give you guys a review and see how these all fit together in the rules of logic. So first, the identity of the principle of identity says that everything is itself. This is what ensures that our terms are clear. The law of non-contradiction says nothing can be true and not true. This prevents falsehood in conclusions. And then the law of excluded middle is that which forces the logical completeness. So if you look at all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, therefore Socrates is mortal, right? Because we have excluded the middle term. Something cannot be both mortal and immortal at the same time. Something cannot be both a man and not a man at the same time. So this excludes a middle option. Either Socrates is a man, or he's not, or he's either a mortal or he's not a man. We've connected those two things intrinsically and logically to each other. And so when I'm presented with a logical argument, there really can only be 4 responses that your opponent has. All right? So the responses can be, I do not accept your conclusion because you used an ambiguous term. One of your terms was ambiguous or unclear. Could you please clarify or specify that for me? The second is, I do not accept your conclusion because you have presumed a false premise. Socrates isn't a man. Socrates is a Labrador retriever, therefore your premise is completely off. Your premise is false, therefore I can't accept your argument. And the third is your logic, there's a logical fallacy. You're broken one of these 3 rules, or what we call the informal fallacies, which we're going to get to for the next part of this talk. You either violated this logical fallacy, your premise is not flowing forth from your conclusion. So these are the 3 responses you can have to an inductive argument. Or there's a 4th one. What's the 4th one? I find no ambiguity, no false premises, no fallacy, and therefore I must accept your conclusion as true. So this is why if you learn how to construct and how to make an argument, and someone says, I don't believe that, your response could be, well, were my terms unclear? Were any of my premises false? Does somehow the premise not follow, does the conclusion not follow the premises? And if they cannot tell you why to any of those things, congratulations, whether they admit it or not, you have won the argument. You have made the argument unless they are able to refute those things. Notice what's not in here. Your premises offend me. Don't find that anywhere in there. Your feelings and logic are not intrinsically connected to each other. Now, this doesn't give us permission to be jerky faces when we're having discussions with people. We should always be charitable, be considerate, and be kind. But I'm going to tell you, friends, when you're logical, some people get very upset at very simple premises. I'll give you one premise. I'll give you one premise that'll really offend people. Life begins at the moment of conception. People get all kinds of offended at that one, because if you say that it is always wrong, so right. Let's do this. Let's make an argument right now. Life begins at the moment of conception. The killing of all innocent human life is intrinsically evil. Therefore, abortion at any stage is intrinsically evil. The premises are true, the terms are clear, and the logic is valid. And people will get mad. Now, what they're going to try to do in that particular argument is they're going to give you all kinds of reasons why an unborn child is not a human life. They'll say, oh, it's just a clump of cells. Well, guess what? You and I are just clumps of cells. So you're going to have to give me more than that to disprove that it's a human life. Well, it's not a human. Okay, then what is it? An elephant? A zebra? It's a parasite. Can't be a parasite. The definition of a parasite is when one species has latched onto another one. That species is human, not a parasite. Try again. See, these are examples of how these principles work when we're having these arguments, when we're having these discussions with people. And there was a time when people could have arguments like this and have these discussions and still be civil to each other afterwards. And I think that's a time that we have to get back to again. And I'll talk more about that at the end. So this is kind of the first part of the talk about the formal structure of an argument. And you see why this is really important before I even start talking next week about the actual, what we call the proofs for the existence of God. Because if we don't understand logic and reasoning, we can't have a discussion about anything. And this is one of the reasons why I know we have some school parents in here, so I'm going to throw it in here. This is one of the reasons why I'm returning to classical, why I think it's imperative that we return to classical education at our school, because young people do not know how to reason. How many of you learned these things in school growing up, at least in some way or some form, right? I see that. There is a generational divide in the room. No one under 40 raised their hand, and that's really sad. I mean, because these used to be things that you learned in education, basic things. In fact, these are things that you learned in grammar school. You learned grammar. And then what we now call middle school was when you learned logic. And then when you moved into high school is when you actually learned to engage the world with logic. We called that rhetoric. And these things have gone away. So if you want my argument for classical education, I just gave it to you. Because these things are very important for us to learn. All right. For further reading, by the way, if you want a great book on formal logic, I recommend by Dr. Peter Kreeft. That's spelled Kreeft, Socratic Logic. Really great. Dr. Peter Kreeft is a professor of philosophy at Boston College. And Boston College is one of those not Catholic universities, but he is a great exception to the faculty there that he himself is a solid Catholic. All right, so now we're going to talk about one of my favorite things. We're going to talk about logical fallacies, and this is really fun. This is the part of when I taught the class. This is the part that the kids would learn. This is the part where I gave them the taboo buzzers when we'd watch Donald and Hillary yell at each other the whole time. All right. So remember, inductive argument. I need to change my things. We'll go back. Terms must be clear, premises must be true, and the logic must be sound. So a formal fallacy is what we call the use of invalid or faulty reasoning. Basically, anything that violates the terms of identity, non-contradiction, and an excluded middle. That would be faulty reasoning. We call those formal fallacies. We also refer to them, the Latin term we might use for that is a non sequitur. You ever heard that before? It doesn't follow. That doesn't make sense. That's a formal fallacy. All bachelors are male. Kathy is single, therefore Kathy is a bachelor. Are the premises true? Yeah. All bachelors are male. Kathy, we'll pretend that Kathy, so we know who Kathy is. Kathy's single. Those premises are true. What's wrong? The logic is invalid, right? Kathy's a bachelor has nothing to do, is not connected in any way, shape, or form to those two premises. Therefore, this is an invalid argument, right? So, but fallacies can be formal or informal. So, formal fallacy is where it makes it, right? It makes it informal just by it. If Socrates is a man, Socrates is mortal. Socrates is not a man, therefore Socrates is not mortal. That is another formal fallacy, right? Because nowhere in there the terms didn't exclude the middle properly. Is Socrates, are only men mortal? If only, that's not what it just says. Men are mortal. So we see that even though the premises are true, the logic here is not valid. So this would be an example of how formal logical fallacies work. Informal fallacies are much more fun. An informal fallacy is a common error of thinking that may not be expressed in a standard system of logic, but these are things that have been commonly embraced by people, and they're great to point out, and they're used all the time to disprove certain things. So I'm going to go through a list of some of my favorite logical fallacies tonight, and these are for you guys to take home and to listen. And now, when you watch the news, when you watch TV ads, when you watch politic debates, you can sit there and yell at the TV and call out all these logical fallacies because you will see them all the time. The only time you may not call them out when you see them is if you hear them coming from the pulpit at St. Elizabeth Seton. But you probably could sometime. It's a habit that we all can fall into very easily. So, informal fallacies. So, all right, we've gone over that. Okay, so ignore the J there. I need to clean up my slides. All right, so my first is a red herring. A red herring is the insertion of something that is completely irrelevant, introducing a new topic or bringing up an argument or point that is unrelated or irrelevant to the one being discussed as a means of avoidance and distraction. Used all the time. By the way, when watching political debates, this is the most common one that I see, the red herring. All right? How about this one? The church does not have the authority to ordain women as priests. All right, Beth, what? I think a woman is just as smart as a man. I wasn't making an argument that women weren't just as smart as a man. You know, so you think women are more spiritual than men? Then I think we should look at the case. Look at Beth and May and John. Who there is more spiritual? Red herrings. You have completely derailed the topic. You've derailed the subject. Those things have nothing to do with each other. And so that's a great example of a red herring. I'd love to go with examples of all of these, like and play my game what I do with the students, where you had to name the fallacy, but I just don't think we have time to do that here tonight. Second fallacy is special pleading. This is a great one. This is the fallacy where things are true for everyone except for me. Right? Special pleading is the fallacy in which a person applies standards or principles to others while making himself or those who he has a special interest in to be completely exempt without providing adequate justification for the exemption. So, for example, here, Grandma, I'm not gambling. This is bingo, not poker. It's different. We're using cards. Yep. Yes, everyone who cheats on tests should get a detention, but not me. I'm the captain of the football team. There's a great example of special pleadings, special exceptions. You'll find this all the time. Ad hominem. This is a very common one. Very common one. To the man is literally what that word means, ad hominem. It's attacking a person or group of persons' character or motives instead of disproving the argument. Who is the biggest target of ad hominem attacks in our world today? Trump, right? Love him or hate him. Agree with him or disagree with him. I would say it's the perfect example. Instead of going after the arguments that a person is making, they'll go after the idiosyncrasies of the person. They'll go after the temperament of the person. They'll go after the moral character of the person. Those are all distractions. If you have an issue with something that a politician is saying, you need to learn how to attack their arguments, attack the premises that they're making, instead of just addressing the person. So I really would invite people to think about that. Mr. Jones believes that Jesus Christ is a real historical figure. He claims that the New Testament documents are the best attested documents in antiquity and that they were written within the first generation after the death of Christ. But Mr. Jones is a grouch, and I saw him kick a puppy last week. That's an example of a red herring, right? We're not addressing the context of any of the things that Mr. Jones is talking about here. Instead, I'm saying Mr. Jones is a jerky face. Well, okay, Mr. Jones might very well be a jerky face. He might very well be a grouch that kicked a puppy, but that has nothing to do with Jesus Christ being a real historical figure. And it's attacking the person. That's why it's ad hominem. Genetic fallacy, and we have to watch out for this one. Genetic fallacy, as the name might imply, says that we accept or reject a claim based on its origin. Here's one that Christians use all the time, and I think we have to think about it. Planned Parenthood was founded by a woman who was racist and believed in eugenics. That is true. That's Margaret Singer. But that's not going to win us an argument on the intrinsic good or intrinsic evil value of abortion, or if Planned Parenthood is a good thing. They might say, okay, well, yeah, she was founded by someone who was crazy, but they've evolved into something much better now. Okay, so you have to be careful when using these things. Another example is, you're a man, your opinions about the wage gap between men and women are wrong. Just because I'm a man, somehow I'm not able to have a thought or opinion about this topic. And we, of course, see this all the time with life issues and other gender-related issues. You're whites. You can't possibly think the way a person of color does. You're a person of color. You can't possibly think the way this one does. You're Korean. You can't possibly speak to any issue that affects someone who's Latino. These are all genetic fallacies, saying that because I come from a particular group or I'm a particular person or this person has no interest or no way of weighing or having any value or merit, their opinion is somehow irrelevant because they come from because the claim is coming from a specific origin, specific group. That's the genetic fallacy. Tu quoque, this is my favorite. We have a tu quoque fallacy on the field, says the logical fallacy referee. Just because someone is a hypocrite, that doesn't negate the point. So if I get up to you and say that, and I said, eating fatty foods is bad for you, and you get up and say, Father, I saw you wolfing down a Big Mac an hour ago. That might be true. I might have wolfed down a Big Mac an hour ago. It does not change the fact that Big Macs are not good for you. Does that make sense? That's the tu quoque fallacy. I get this one all the time. Faulty appeal to authority. First of all, appeal to authority, whenever you're making an argument, appeal to authority is generally viewed as the weakest premise, as the weakest support for an argument. So says Thomas Aquinas. Okay, no one got the irony there. It's actually true, though. Thomas Aquinas does say that. There are cases, and we'll talk about this more as we get in the final part of the series, when we start talking about the church. Because when we talk about the nature of the church, authority is actually very important. Because when we talk about because the question about the Catholic Church and the question about the teaching authority of the church is a question about the nature of authority itself and where it comes from. So when it comes to debating theological points or debating points that we believe are divine revelation, authority becomes very important. But when we're making an argument in general, we have to be careful of appealing of a faulty appeal to authority. That's claiming someone's an authority, but they have no real knowledge on the subject, right? So, for example, if I say, I drive a Jeep because Dr. Kamina drives a Jeep and he's a doctor. I'm picking on you because you're sitting right there. But people do it to you guys all the time, don't they? They do it to physicians all the time. Being a physician does not make you an expert on what kind of vehicle you should drive. My favorite example, I'm going to keep picking on physicians, if that's okay, since you're sitting right there, Dr. Kamina. How about, does it appeal to someone who has an authority outside their area of expertise? This is an actual, oh, come on. Okay, this is an actual ad from a magazine in the 50s. More doctors smoke Camels than any other cigarette. That would be an example of a faulty appeal to authority. I think scientists are wrong. There's no such thing as global warming. I just finished talking to my boss, and he thought it was ridiculous. Good for him. Yeah. Your boss is not an expert in global warming. Okay, argumentum ad populum. And when we talk about advertising propaganda, we might call this the bandwagon appeal. It's kind of the same thing. A lot of people are doing it, therefore it's right. So it's a proposition is true just because many or most people believe it. You've got to get a copy of Jesus Calling. It's the #1 best-selling daily devotional, and it's sold millions of copies. It's such a great book for Christians to read. Okay. Now maybe you want to read something because other people are reading it, but that doesn't tell you about the objective value of the material inside of it, right? If you don't believe me, just look at some of the news channels and television shows and books that people read now, right? The fact that a lot of people are reading them or looking at them doesn't mean that they're necessary in authority. Argumentum ad populum. Straw man. This is one of my favorites. The straw man is changing or exaggerating an opposing position to make it easier to refute. Example. You ever heard of this one, the flying spaghetti monster? When we start going to proofs for existence of God, you can say, okay, you're going to prove that God, you say that because the world is perfectly ordered, that means that there must be something that ordered it. And you say it's God, but I say it's the flying spaghetti monster. Well, that doesn't work because in order for the argument for order to work, to understood, it has to be an infinitely perfect being that created and ordered the world. And the flying spaghetti monster is not an infinitely perfect being, unless flying spaghetti monster is another name you have for God. Here's a good one. I immortalized the students who were the first year in my apologetics class in my slides. So one guy says to another, one person says to another, I've been learning about the Second World War lately. I found that America provoked Japan into attacking Pearl Harbor. I don't think that this was the right thing for us to do. Oh, so now you're taking the side of the Axis? Do you think Germany and Japan were right to do what they did? No, that's not the argument that the person is making at all. And again, this is another one that we see all the time. One of my favorite, a new logical fallacy that I've given the name reductio ad Hitlerum. This is where literally anybody who you disagree with becomes Hitler. That's an example of a straw man. Is all right. You have a dog. Hitler had a dog. You must be Hitler. Those two things don't flow from each other, even though the example of the formal fallacies. Straw man. Circular reasoning, also known as circular definitions. P is true because X is true, and X is true because P is true. You can't. This is faulty reasoning, faulty logic. You cannot define something with itself. And you know who does it all the time? Christians. All right. For example, how do we know the Bible is inspired by God? Because the Bible tells us the Bible is inspired by God. That's circular reasoning. All Scripture is God. This is a great passage that's used for this. Or how about this one? A woman is someone who identifies as a woman. That's circular reasoning. I tell you, if you go to a college campus, like many people do, and you say, what is a woman? That's the answer you're going to get over and over and over again. I said, that's not an answer. You've given me a non-answer. A woman is someone who identifies as a woman. A circle is a thing having circle-like properties. A square is a thing that has square-like properties. A church is a thing that's church-like. I'm not telling you anything. I'm not actually providing you with a definition. Instead, I'm just using terms that are redundant over and over again. Capital punishment for murder is perfectly justified because it's right for society to put to death those who've committed murder. Circular reasoning. Now, I'm using examples that I know might, intentionally examples that might, get people's ire up. I'm not making an argument for or against the topic. I'm just telling you that this is faulty logic for this particular topic. Does that make sense? All right. I don't understand why the same button that worked 3 minutes ago doesn't work now. There we go. Yes, thank you. Is your laptop just on the way out? I don't know. Anyway, okay. Equivocation. The fallacy of equivocation occurs when a key term or phrase in an argument is used in an ambiguous way, one with one meaning in one portion of the argument and one with another meaning in another portion of the argument. I have one of my favorite examples from my, by the way, favorite movie of all time, because it was the first one I sat still for as a kid. And now it's not going to load, now that it's circular reasoning there. Why does technology hate me today? I'm not I think of myself as a pretty technologically inclined person. All right, this is when Dorothy's famous meeting with the Scarecrow. The Scarecrow tells her he hasn't got a brain, and Dorothy says, how can you talk if you haven't got a brain? And he says, I know a lot of people without brains that do an awful lot of talking. Because what he's done is he's used two senses of the word brain. One meaning the literal organ that's inside of our head, and the other one meaning the notion of common sense. He switched those two arguments around. Another great one is another clip I used at school. It's from Sesame Street. Those of us that grew up with Sesame Street, there's a great famous clip from Sesame Street where Ernie is holding a banana in his ear. And Bert walks up to, that's actually another, sorry, that's another fallacy. I'm getting ahead of myself here. We'll go back. Equivocation, I'll give you another example of it. Everyone knows that laws change all the time. Prohibition was repealed only after a few years. Laws against criticizing the president were repealed. You see, the laws of thermodynamics, which say it's impossible to make a true perpetual motion machine, can easily change, just like prohibition. My company is attempting to build a perpetual motion machine, and I encourage you to invest in it. What they did is they took laws and used it in several different ways. They removed from the laws of the land, which are promulgations, which are decrees that we are forced to follow by rule of law, and then the laws of physics, which correspond to reality. These are two different uses of the word law, and that's what we call a equivocation or a false equivocation. Loaded question. This is one of my favorite. A question that contains a controversial or unjustified assumption. Like, why do Catholics worship Mary? Right? You don't. That's a loaded question. Another example of a loaded question, that's loaded. All right, advertisement. So when are you going to make the new Ford Bubble Box your first car? Loaded question. Right? And then the next one is slippery slope. This is asserts that a relatively small first step leads to a chain of related events culminating in significant and usually negative effect. If we grant this permit for an Islamic mosque in our city, then it's going to open the floodgates to terrorists, and before we know it, we'll have people planting bombs at City Hall. That's a slippery slope, which is different than logical consequences, but we can talk about that later. That is a slippery slope. The next one, this has to do with the banana in the ear. This is one of my favorites. Post hoc ergo propter hoc. After which, therefore, because of. And we return to Sheldon and the Big Bang Theory, if we can. Okay. Sheldon is talking to his mother on the phone after returning from an expedition to the Arctic. He says, "No, Mother, I could not feel your church group praying for me while I was away." And he says, "No, Mother, just because I arrived home safely does not mean that it worked. That's post hoc ergo propter hoc." And then he says, "No, Mom, I'm not sassing you in Eskimo talk." It's like there's a scene from Sesame Street with Bert and Ernie. Ernie's holding a banana in his ear. Bert comes up and says, "Ernie, what are you doing with a banana in your ear?" He says, "I'm using it to keep away the alligators." And Bert says, "Ernie, there are no alligators on Sesame Street." He said, "See, then it worked." Just because something happens after something does not mean that it happens because of the something. False dichotomy. This is a big one. When two choices are presented, yet more exist, or a spectrum of possible choices exists between two extremes, false dilemmas are usually characterized by either this or that language, but can also be characterized by omissions and choices. Another variety is we also have the false trilemma, where you have three of them. So that's where three choices are presented instead of one. Watch out for these. These are very common, and they happen all the time. Examples. Either you believe in science and reject religion, or you must remain in blind superstition and reject modern science. The opposition between faith and reason is a perfect example of a false dichotomy. In fact, by the way, some of the greatest scientists, the greatest founders of science have come from the church. The modern scientific method was promulgated by Father Bacon. He was a Franciscan priest. What we now call the Big Bang Theory was first named, the cosmic egg theory was named by Father Georges Lemaitre, a Jesuit priest. The modern genetics, the father of modern genetics, was a Catholic priest. In fact, we invented the whole university system. So the idea that there's faith, the opposition between faith and reason is a perfect example of what we call a false dichotomy. Here's another one you hear all the time. Either God is not all powerful or he's not all loving. If God were all loving, he would want to rid the world of evil. If he were all powerful, then he would want to rid the evil in the world. But there is evil in the world, so either God is not all powerful or not all loving. That's a perfect example of a false dichotomy. And it's something we could unpack and demonstrate as a false dichotomy in later lessons. Appeal to, why am I speaking into this when I'm wearing a wireless microphone? I never claimed to be that bright, my brothers and sisters. We're almost at the end. I don't think I'd get through all of these tonight. So the last one is the appeal to emotion. This is everyone's favorite. You know, what you're saying can't be true because it hurts my feelings. Or what you're saying can't be true because I don't like it. This is a great general category of many fallacies that use emotion in place of reason in order to attempt to win the argument. It's a type of manipulation used in place of valid logic all the time. And I'll just give you some examples. All right. Appeal to pity. Please hire me. I really need this job. All right. You haven't convinced me. You haven't given me any reasons why I should hire you other than the fact that, it's bad for you if I don't. Appeal to fear. If you don't buy this, you're going to regret it. Appeal to anger. Those people are destroying our country. Appeal to love or appeal to pride. A real patriot would support this. Appeal to guilt. How could you not help when you could? An appeal to flattery. You're too smart to not agree with me. I tell people that all the time. But you see these all the time in place of actual arguments. And so I hope that tonight that we could give you some of these hasty generalizations. That's another favorite one. A conclusion about everything of a particular kind based on a few examples. Atheists are dangerous and immoral people. I know. My neighbor's an atheist, and he has skull tattoos and he yells obscenities at his living girlfriend. Right? Muslims will never listen to the gospel. Look at how they persecute Christians. Nobody wants to hear the gospel anymore. I've tried witnessing to my coworkers, and they just shut me down and refuse to talk to me about God. All priests are pedophiles. Those are great examples of hasty generalizations. That just because you've made a small sampling, that doesn't mean that this is true in every case. Another great logical fallacy. Conversely, we'll hear this sometimes. Christians are dangerous to society. That last shooting was carried out by someone who went to church. Christians are all about guilting people into giving their money in exchange for heaven. I visited a church once, and they took 2 offerings in one day, and the pastor was preaching on money. Catholics are intolerant of other religions. These are great examples of hasty generalizations we see against Christians. But don't worry, we like I said, we do it too a lot of times with atheists. So I wanted to next week I want to move into actual proofs for the existence of God. Before I can get into the proofs, I had to give us the general outline, the general form of logic. So you've seen what an argument looks like. And so I just want to invite us once again to kind of remember the general rules of when we engage someone. One of them is to be calm. This is the one that I'm really bad at. And I'm so bad. I'll tell you, folks, if there's something you don't know about me, is there's something that St. Paul says about how we should suffer fools gladly, and I don't do that. If something doesn't make sense to me, I tend to get very hot very quick. And it's not good. And if you were at the 10 o'clock Mass, not this week, but last week, you saw it happen. Someone came up to me after Mass and accused me of preaching hate speech. And I don't regret anything I said, because everything I said was very true, but I regret that I did not say it in a calm manner that would come across as unkind. My heart was pumping, my voice was elevated, and we lose authority. Even if everything we're saying is true, in those moments we lose it. So the best thing that we can do is, even if someone says something completely ridiculous, just try to remain calm. And then that's where I say be logical. Stick to the logic. Identify the fallacies. Identify the false premises. Identify the informal fallacies if there are one. And just explain it all to them. Tell them, you really can't say a woman is someone who identifies as a woman. That's what we call circular reasoning, and that's just not logical. And then they don't know how to respond to that because they've never been trained in logic. And then, of course, like I said before, right, the 2 main rules: be logical, be charitable. Let's talk about what that can look like other than just being calm. Actually listen to what the other person is saying. Rather than trying to predict what their arguments are going to be, listen to them. And then find common ground. I think a lot of times when we're having a debate, it starts with finding common ground. I'll use abortion because that's a very hot topic. If someone will say, so you're saying that a woman who is sexually assaulted should be forced to carry her baby. I'll say, okay, why don't we put that situation aside for a moment? Are you willing to say that abortion is wrong in every other circumstance? Well, no, because I believe that that it's not a life until it's been 6 weeks. I said, okay, well, let's put those 2 aside. Are you willing to say that abortion should be illegal after 6 weeks? And actually, you find yourself start to gaining ground with people when you're having a discussion with people by starting with the things that you find common, and then through that, you're able to come to some form of consensus and at least get the other person to understand your side of the argument. I think those were the three. And then the last thing I want to say is, though we're being kind, we're being calm, we're being charitable, we're being logical, be bold. And what I mean by that is, don't be afraid to speak the truth. Don't be afraid to say, I believe Jesus Christ is the Son of God. Don't be afraid to say, I believe the Catholic Church has the fullness of truth. Don't be afraid to say, I believe life begins at the moment of conception. Don't be afraid to say, I believe that a man is a biological male. Stand by those convictions firmly. Don't back down from them. And we can do that while at the same time being calm, being logical, being rational, and recognizing the dignity of the person that's in front of us. And oftentimes this means, to quote the late Charlie Kirk, don't do to them what they do to us. In other words, if your opponent starts mocking you, making fun of you, calling you names, don't resort to it. If it gets to that point, honestly, that might be the best time to end the conversation. But if you can, if you're able to move on and just move past all that mockery and respond with clear, concise, irrefutable logic, you'll be surprised how far that witness goes, even to that person. It might be years later that person recalls the conversation. So, you know what? I cussed out this person. I called them names. I insulted their faith. I insulted their God. I insulted their priest. And they just remained calm and responded to me logically. So that's the basic introduction to logic. You got a semester's worth of introduction to logic in what, and how long? Hour and a half. That's about how long I wanted to go. I couldn't tell you how long it was because the clock died, for better or for worse. So thank you guys so much for coming. Next week, what we're going to do is we're going to start to talk about the actual proofs for the existence of God. And I'm going to show you about how we can actually prove that God exists via reason alone. And then I hope in the next week to make a case for, to continue with some more proofs for the existence of God, and then to make a case for objective moral reality. And that'll end the first part of this series. Then we're going to take a break for the holidays because November and December get pretty crazy. And then we're going to pick this up again in January with the case for Jesus Christ. So we'll have 2 sessions that are on the case for Jesus Christ. And then that'll continue on into February with the third part of the entire series, which would be the case for the Catholic Church. So we have 3. This is one of 3 sessions. That's one of a 3-part series, if that makes any sense. So thank you guys for coming. If you're wondering, you notice we are recording. We're going to try to find a way to post these, and I'll try to find a way to make these slides available to you guys who might want these slides via PDF and email. So thank you guys so much. I hope you guys have a great night. And let me just give you God's blessing before you take off. The Lord be with you. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he look kindly upon you and be gracious to you. May he let his face shine upon you and grant you his peace. And may the blessing of Almighty God, the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit come down upon you and remain with you forever. Amen. Have a great night. Thank you guys so much.